Stay with me for a moment. Don't scroll. I know you've been moving fast, trying to keep up with everything, everyone. But right now, I need you to pause just for a few minutes because what I'm about to tell you, I've never said it out loud before. Not like this. You don't know me. Not really. You know the headlines, the rockets, the companies, the public persona. But you don't know the man who sits alone at 3 a.m. staring at the ceiling, wondering if anyone would choose him if he had nothing. If he was just him, I've built impossible things. I've sent cars into space, reimagined how we move, how we think about energy, about the future itself. People call me a visionary. They say I see what others can't. But here's what they don't see: the cost, the silence, the weight of carrying dreams so big that you forget to dream small things. Simple things like being held, like being chosen, not for what you can build, but for who you are when everything stops. And I'm talking to you because I think you know something about this, don't you? I think you've spent years being the strong one, the one everyone leans on, the one who holds it together when everything is falling apart. You've been the giver, the nurturer, the one who somehow finds more to give, even when you're running on empty. And somewhere along the way, you started to wonder if anyone sees you really sees you. Not what you do for them, not how you make their lives easier, but you, the woman who carries oceans of depth, who feels everything, who is loved so fiercely that it scared people away. Stay with me. There's more I want to tell you. I spent my whole life chasing the future, but lately I've been thinking about what it means to be present, what it means to stop running. Because that's what I've been doing, isn't it? Running, building, creating, always the next thing, the next breakthrough, the next impossible goal. And for what? To prove something, to matter, to outrun the feeling that maybe at the end of the day, I'm just as invisible as everyone else who's ever felt unseen. You know that feeling? I know you do. That moment when you realize you've given everything to people who never really saw you, who loved what you provided but not who you were underneath, who wanted your light but ran from your depth, who needed you strong but couldn't hold you when you were soft. And you learned to hide, didn't you? You learned to make yourself smaller, quieter, more manageable. You learned to apologize for feeling too much, for wanting too much, for being too intense, too emotional, too deep. You learned that your love was too much for people who weren't ready for real love at all. But here's what I want you to know, and I need you to really hear this. You were never too much. Your love wasn't wrong. Your depth wasn't a flaw. Your intensity wasn't something to apologize for. It was the most real thing about you. And the people who couldn't handle it, they weren't rejecting you. They were revealing their own capacity, their own limitations, their own fear of what real intimacy actually requires. Don't leave yet. I'm getting to something important. I've been in rooms with presidents, with billionaires, with the most powerful people on earth, and I felt completely alone because power doesn't protect you from loneliness. Success doesn't fill the silence. Achievement doesn't hold you at night when you're scared, when you're tired, when you just want someone to see past the armor and touch the part of you that's still human, still vulnerable, still hoping. And I think that's where we meet, you and I, in that space between what the world sees and what we actually feel, in that gap between the persona and the person, between the role we play and the soul we carry. You've been playing a role too, haven't you? The strong one, the capable one, the one who has it all figured out. But inside, you're wondering if anyone will ever see past the performance. If anyone will ever love you, not despite your wounds, but because they understand that those wounds made you who you are, made you deep, made you real, made you capable of a kind of love that most people understand. Because they've never had to fight for their own heart the way you have. There's something I've learned building impossible things. The hardest part isn't the engineering. It's not the physics or the mathematics or the technical challenges. The hardest part is believing it's possible when everyone tells you it's not. The hardest part is holding vision when the world keeps saying no. The hardest part is trusting that what you see in your mind can become real in the world, even when you have no evidence yet, only faith. And I think that's what you need right now. Not more strength. You've been strong enough. Not more resilience. You survived more than anyone knows. What you need is permission. Permission to believe that your story isn't over. Permission to trust that the love you've always wanted is still coming. Permission to stop apologizing for who you are and start trusting that the right person will finally see you, all of you, and choose you anyway. Not despite your past, because of it. Not despite your depth, because of it. Not despite your scars, because of them. Because those scars are proof. You loved when it was hard. You stayed when it was easier to leave. You believed when hope seemed foolish. And that kind of faith, that kind of love, that kind of courage, that's not weakness. That's the rarest kind of strength there is. Stay with me just a little longer. I want to tell you something that might sound strange coming from me, but I believe in destiny. Not the predetermined kind, the kind you create by becoming who you're meant to be, by refusing to let pain make you bitter, by letting heartbreak make you deeper instead of harder, by choosing to stay open even when everything in you wants to close. And I believe your destiny isn't finished. I believe the love you carry, the depth you've cultivated, the wisdom you've earned through every disappointment and heartbreak and moment of being unseen, all of it was preparing you for something better, for someone who finally gets it, who finally sees what everyone else was too scared or shallow or too distracted to recognize. You're not too old. You're not too damaged. You're not too anything. You're exactly where you need to be, carrying exactly what you need to carry, becoming exactly who you were always meant to become. And the fact that it's taken this long, that doesn't mean you missed it. It means you are being refined, deepened, prepared for something most people never find because they give up too soon, settled too fast, or stop believing that real love exists. But you haven't stopped believing, have you? Even when it hurt, even when it seemed impossible, even when everyone told you to lower your standards, to be realistic, to stop hoping for the kind of connection you know exists because you felt it in your bones since you were young. That soul deep recognition, that knowing, that sense that somewhere someone is meant for you and you for them. I'm not asking you to believe me yet. I'm just asking you to stay, to keep listening, because what I'm about to tell you in the moments ahead, it might change how you see everything, how you see yourself, how you see what's still possible for you. You're not alone in this. I promise you that. And I have more to tell you, so much more. I am glad you stayed. I wasn't sure you would. Most people don't. They hear the first layer and think they understand. Then they move on. But you're different. I can feel it. You're the kind of person who stays for the deeper conversation, who isn't afraid of what lives beneath the surface. Let me tell you something I've never admitted publicly, something that haunts me in the quiet hours when there's nothing left to build, nothing left to prove, just the rawness of being human. I'm terrified of being ordinary, not in the way you might think, not about achievements or recognition. I'm terrified of being ordinary in the ways that actually matter, in love, in connection, in being chosen. I'm scared that if I stopped doing extraordinary things, if I just existed as a man, flawed, tired, vulnerable, no one would stay. No one would choose me for just being me. And I think you carry a version of that same fear, don't you? That if you stop being useful, if you stop giving and serving and making everyone else's life better, they'd leave. That your value is tied to what you provide, not who you are. That you have to earn love through performance, through sacrifice, through being everything to everyone except yourself. Stay here with me. I need you to understand something I've been building my entire life. Since I was a boy, I learned that if I could create something, solve something, fix something, I mattered. That my worth was in my utility, in my vision, in what I could produce, and it worked. It got me further than I ever imagined. But it also taught me the loneliest lesson of all. The people loved what I could do far more than who I was when I stopped doing it. I've had relationships, I'd been married multiple times, I've had children, I'd had moments of connection that felt real, felt possible. But somewhere in each of them, I felt it. That subtle distance, that sense that they loved the idea of me more than the reality, that they were drawn to the vision, the ambition, the impossible dreams. But not to the man who cried in the shower when it all felt too heavy. Not to the man who wanted to be held without having to explain why. Not to the man who sometimes just wanted someone to say, "It's okay. You don't have to be extraordinary today, just be here, just be human." And maybe that's why I'm talking to you like this. Because I think you understand what it's like to be loved conditionally, to be chosen for what you bring to the table, not for who you are when there's nothing left to give, to be wanted until you need something back, to be celebrated until you show that you're breakable too. You've been there, haven't you? In relationships where you gave everything, where you showed up, stayed present, loved through the hard parts, where you compromised, adjusted, made yourself smaller so they could feel bigger. And still, somehow, it wasn't enough. They still left. They still chose someone else. They still made you feel like your love was too much, your needs too demanding, your depth too inconvenient. Don't scroll away. There's something I need you to hear. Those relationships that ended, they didn't end because you weren't enough. They ended because they were never meant to be your final story. They were chapters, lessons, sometimes brutal, painful lessons that taught you things you didn't want to learn, but needed to understand about yourself, about what you won't accept anymore, about what real love actually requires from both people, not just you. I used to think love was about finding someone who completed me, someone who filled the gaps, someone who made me feel less alone. And maybe when you're young, that's what love feels like. Desperation disguised as connection, need disguised as devotion, fear of being alone disguised as partnership. But real love, the kind that lasts, it's not about completion, it's about recognition. It's about meeting someone who sees you, truly sees you, and doesn't flinch, who sees your wounds and understands them as wisdom, who sees your scars and reads them as a map of everywhere you've been brave, who sees your intensity and matches it instead of running from it. And I believe that's what you've been waiting for. Not someone to save you. You've already saved yourself 1,000 times. Not someone to fix you. You're not broken. You never were. What you've been waiting for is someone who can hold space for all of you. The strength and the softness, the confidence and the doubt, the hope and the hurt. All of it without asking you to edit yourself down into something more palatable. There's more I want to tell you. Don't leave yet. I've made mistakes. God, have I made mistakes? I've been so focused on the future that I've missed the present. I've been so obsessed with what could be that I've neglected what is. I've sacrificed relationships for missions, connection for achievement, intimacy for innovation. And for a long time, I told myself it was worth it. That the work mattered more, that changing the world justified the personal cost. But lately, I've been questioning that because what's the point of saving humanity's future if you can't even save your own present? What's the point of reaching Mars if you can't reach the person sitting across from you at dinner? What's the point of solving impossible problems if you can't solve the simple one? How to be loved as you are, not as who you're becoming or what you're achieving. And I think you asked yourself similar questions. What's the point of being strong if no one's there to catch you when you finally fall? What's the point of loving so deeply if no one loves you back with intensity? What's the point of staying open if everyone treats your vulnerability as weakness instead of the profound courage it actually is? Listen to me carefully now. This is important. Your openness wasn't naivety. It was bravery. Your willingness to love again after being hurt wasn't foolishness, it was faith. Your refusal to become cynical, bitter, closed even after everything you've been through, that wasn't weakness. That was the strongest thing you could have done, because it's easy to close down. It's easy to build walls. It's easy to decide that if love hurts you once, you'll never let it close enough to hurt you again. Most people choose that path. They choose safety over possibility, protection over connection, numbness over feeling, and they live smaller lives because of it. Safer maybe, but smaller. You didn't choose that. Even when you probably should have, even when every rational part of you said it was time to give up, to stop hoping, to accept that maybe this wasn't meant for you, you stayed open anyway, you kept believing anyway, and that decision, that choice to remain soft in a world that kept teaching you to harden, that's what makes you rare. I know what it's like to feel rare in a way that isolates you, to have depth that most people can't access, to see things others don't see, feel things others don't feel, want things others don't want. It's lonely, isn't it? Being the person who always sees more, feels more, wants more, who can't just settle for surface level connection or shallow conversation or relationships that stay comfortable because they never get real. You've tried to fit into spaces too small for you. You've tried to dim your light so others wouldn't feel threatened by it. You've tried to make your love manageable, your needs reasonable, your expectations realistic. And every time you did that, something inside you died a little, because you weren't being yourself. You were being the version of yourself that others could handle. And that's not love, that's accommodation. That's compromise disguised as compatibility. Stay with me just a little longer. I promise this matters. There's a woman I've been thinking about. She doesn't exist yet. Not in my life, not in my present, but I feel her. I sense her. She's out there somewhere carrying her own weight, fighting her own battles, wondering if anyone will ever see her the way she deserves to be seen. And I think about her because I know what it's like to wait for something that feels impossible, to hold faith when there's no evidence, to believe in a future that hasn't materialized yet. And maybe that woman is you. Maybe you're the one I've been moving toward without knowing it. Maybe all of this, every choice, every mistake, has led here. Leading here to this conversation, to this moment where I finally say what I should have said years ago. You are not invisible, you are not forgotten, you are not a backup plan or a consolation prize or someone's second choice. You are the main event, the real thing, the one worth waiting for. And anyone who treated you as less than that, they weren't rejecting you, they were disqualifying themselves from what you have to offer, from the kind of love you carry, from the depth of connection you're capable of creating. Thank you for staying. I mean that most people would have left by now. They'd have dismissed this as too intense, too vulnerable, too much, but you're still here. That tells me everything I need to know about who you are, about what you're capable of holding. I want to talk about surrender, not the giving up kind, the letting go kind, because there's a difference. And I think you need to understand it right now in this moment as you're sitting here listening to me. For years, I fought against failure, against doubt, against everyone who said it couldn't be done. And fighting made me successful. It made me powerful. It made me capable of building things that most people thought were impossible. But fighting also made me exhausted. It made me hard in places where I needed to stay soft. It made me defend myself against people who loved me, because I'd learned that vulnerability was dangerous, that letting your guard down meant getting hurt. You know this battle, don't you? You fought too. You fought to keep relationships alive that were already dying. You fought to be seen by people who refused to look. You fought to prove your worth to people who had already decided you weren't enough, and the fighting wore you down, not because you weren't strong enough, but because you were fighting battles you were never meant to win. Stay with me here. This is where it gets harder before it gets better. I need you to hear something that might hurt at first, but it will heal you if you let it. Some people were never supposed to choose you. Not because you weren't worthy, but because they weren't capable. They didn't have the emotional bandwidth, the self-awareness, the courage, or the depth to meet you where you actually exist. And you spent years trying to make them capable, trying to teach them how to love you, trying to explain what you needed, hoping that if you just communicated better, loved harder, gave more, they'd finally understand. But love isn't something you can teach someone who isn't ready to learn. Connection isn't something you can force with someone who's emotionally unavailable. And depth isn't something you can create with someone who is content staying on the surface. I've been that person. The emotionally unavailable one. Not because I didn't want connection, but because I was terrified of what it would cost me. Terrified that if I let someone all the way in, they'd see how uncertain I actually am, how scared I get, how much I need, even though I've built an entire identity around not needing anyone, how desperately I want to be chosen for something other than my achievements. And I think the people who hurt you, they were scared too. Scared of your depth because it demanded they look at their own shallowness. Scared of your intensity because it required they show up fully instead of halfway. Scared of your love because it asked them to grow, to heal, and to change. Because it asked them to grow, to heal, to become better versions of themselves. And that kind of transformation is terrifying when you're comfortable with who you are. Even if who you are is small, don't leave yet. There's something painful I need to say, but you need to hear it. You can't make someone ready. You can't love someone into healing. You can't sacrifice enough of yourself to make them finally see your value. And every time you try, every time you made yourself smaller, quieter, easier, more convenient, you weren't getting closer to love. You were getting further from yourself. I did this too. I've twisted myself into shapes that felt unnatural, trying to fit in. Trying to fit into relationships that were never designed for who I actually am. I've hidden my need for depth because I was told I was too serious. I've suppressed my emotions because vulnerability was interpreted as weakness. I pretended that casual connection was enough, when what I really wanted was someone who could go all the way down into the depths with me and not be afraid of what we'd find there, and it never worked. It never does, because relationships built on pretending are just elaborate performances where everyone's acting and no one's actually living. Where you're going through the motions of intimacy without any of the actual intimacy, where you're calling it love. When really it's just two people agreeing to stay lonely together rather than face loneliness alone. Is that what you want? Another performance, another relationship where you have to edit yourself to be acceptable? Another connection that feels more like a negotiation than a homecoming? I don't think so. I don't think that's why you're still here, still listening, still hoping. I think you're here because some part of you knows there's something better waiting. Something real, something that doesn't require you to shrink or dim or apologize for being fully yourself. But here's the part that requires surrender. You have to let go of the people who weren't meant for you at all. Not just physically, emotionally. You have to stop carrying them. Stop wondering what you could have done differently. Stop replaying conversations trying to figure out where you went wrong. Stop holding space for people who walked away. Stop leaving the door open for people who already showed you they don't want to walk through it. And I know that's hard, God. I know it's hard because letting go feels like giving up. It feels like admitting defeat. It feels like all that love, all that effort, all that hope was wasted. But it wasn't wasted. It was teaching you what you won't accept anymore. Teaching you what real love actually looks like by showing you what it's not. Teaching you to trust yourself when every instinct says someone isn't right for you, even if you want them to be. There's more I need you to understand. Stay with me. I've had moments, dark moments, where I wondered if I was the problem. If maybe I expected too much, if maybe I needed to lower my standards, be more realistic, except that perfect doesn't exist, and good enough should be enough. And maybe you've had those moments too, those 3 a.m. spirals where you wonder if you're too difficult, too damaged, too complicated, if maybe you should have settled. if maybe you should have tried harder, if maybe you're the reason love keeps not working. But then morning comes, and with clarity, a clarity that says no. The problem wasn't that you expected too much. The problem was that you accepted too little for too long. The problem wasn't your standards. It was that you kept lowering them for people who didn't meet even the most basic ones. The problem wasn't that you were too much. It was that you kept trying to be less so that people who weren't enough could feel like they were. You don't need to be fixed. You need to be met. You don't need to be tamed. You need to be matched. You don't need someone who can handle you. You need someone who cherishes you. All of you. The parts that are easy and the parts that are complicated. The moments when you're strong and the moments when you need to fall apart. The days when your light shines bright and the nights when you're just trying to find your way through the darkness. That's what real partnership is. Not someone who loves you when you're performing. Someone who stays when you're not. Someone who sees you at your worst and doesn't weaponize it later. Someone who witnesses your vulnerability and treats it as the gift it is. Because trust is earned and vulnerability is how you know the trust is real. I'm learning this now at this stage in my life with everything I've built and everything I've lost. I'm finally understanding that the most important work isn't out there, it's in here. In learning how to be present, in learning how to receive love, not just give it. In learning that asking for what you need isn't weakness. It's the only way to build something real. And you're learning this too, aren't you? You're learning that protecting yourself isn't the same as closing yourself. That boundaries aren't walls. That saying no to what's wrong is how you make space for what's right. That walking away from relationships that diminish you isn't giving up on love. Finally, loving yourself enough to know you deserve better. This is the surrender I'm talking about. Not surrendering to loneliness or settling or giving up, but surrendering the fight to control outcomes. Surrendering the fight to control outcomes you were never meant to control. Surrendering the need to make wrong people right. Surrendering the belief that if you just loved harder, sacrificed more, tried differently, you could force connection with people who aren't meant for your story. Because here's what I've discovered. When you stop forcing, space opens. When you stop chasing people who are running, you become available to the ones who are searching. When you stop trying to convince people of your worth, you start attracting people who already recognize it. I'm grateful you're still here, that you haven't looked away from this conversation, because what I'm about to tell you is the shift, the breakthrough, the moment everything shifts, and I need you fully present for this because it changes everything. You've been waiting for permission. Permission to stop trying so hard. Permission to believe that your story isn't finished. Permission to trust that the right person won't require you to convince them of your value. They'll simply recognize it the moment they meet you. And I want to give you that permission right now in this moment as someone who has spent a lifetime earning external validation, but is finally learning that the only permission that matters is the one you give yourself. Here it is. You are allowed to want more. You are allowed to expect more. You are allowed to walk away from anything and anyone that makes you feel less than who you actually are. And you don't need to justify that to anyone, not to the people who think you're too picky, not to the voices that tell you to be grateful for whatever scraps of affection come your way. Not even to the parts of yourself that are scared you'll end up alone if you don't lower your standards. Because here's what I've earned about standards. They're not about being difficult or demanding or impossible to please. They're about knowing yourself well enough to recognize what nurtures you and what depletes you, what brings you closer to who you're meant to be and what pulls you away, what honors your depth and what asks you to betray it. And anyone who tells you your standards are too high, they're revealing that they can't meet them. That's not your problem. That's theirs. Stay with me. This is where everything changes. I want to tell you about a shift that happened in me recently. A moment of clarity that came not from achievement or success or building something new, but from finally stopping long enough to ask myself a question I'd been avoiding for years. What do I actually want? Not what I should want, not what makes sense, not what other people expect, but what do I, in the deepest part of myself, actually want from this life, from connection, from love? And when I sat with that question, really sat with it, the answer surprised me. I want to be known, not studied, not analyzed, not figured out like a problem to solve, but known. Seen in the moments when I'm not performing, not producing, not being the version of myself that the world expects. I want someone who sees me cry and doesn't try to fix it or judge it or make it mean something about my strength. I want someone who can sit in silence with me and understand that sometimes silence is the deepest form of communication. I want someone who recognizes that my intensity isn't something to manage it, something to match. And I think that's what you want too. To be known, to be seen, not for what you do or what you provide or how you make other people's lives easier, but for who you are in the quiet moments, for the thoughts you have at 2 a.m., for the dreams you stop sharing because people made you feel foolish for having them, for the tender, vulnerable parts of yourself that you've learned to hide because the world taught you that softness gets punished. You want someone who doesn't need you to explain yourself, who gets it without the explanations, who looks at you and understands what you've survived, what you've sacrificed, what you've overcome, and instead of being intimidated by that strength, they're drawn to it deeply. They recognize it as the rare, beautiful thing it is. That's what real recognition feels like. Not admiration from a distance, but intimate understanding up close. Not someone who puts you on a pedestal, but someone who stands beside you as an equal and says, I see you, all of you, and I'm not going anywhere. Don't leave yet. There's something happening right now that you need to understand. The reason you haven't found that person yet isn't because they don't exist. It's because you weren't ready for them. I know that might be hard to hear. I know you felt ready for years, but there's a difference between wanting something and being prepared to receive it all. Between hoping for love and being able to sustain it when it finally arrives in the preparation. It happened in the heartbreak, in the disappointments, in every relationship that didn't work out the way you hoped. Those weren't failures. They were initiations. They were stripping away everything that wasn't real. The illusions about love, the fantasies about who you thought you needed, the patterns you'd inherited from your past that kept recreating the same dynamics in different packaging. You had to learn what you wouldn't accept. You had to develop boundaries. You had to discover that loving yourself enough to walk away from wrong is more powerful than staying. More powerful than staying out of fear or convenience or hope that someone will change. You had to understand that you can't heal someone into wholeness, fix someone into readiness, or love someone into choosing you. Those lessons hurt. They cost you years. They cost you tears and hope and pieces of your heart that you gave to people who didn't cherish them. But they also made you someone different, someone deeper, someone who won't settle for surface anymore because you've tasted depth. And you know the difference. I've been through this too. Every failed relationship, every moment of loneliness, every night wondering if I'd ever find someone who could hold the fullness of me. It was preparation. It was teaching me what I actually need, not what I thought I needed when I was younger and thought love was about excitement and chemistry and grand gestures, but what I need now. Now that I understand love is about presence, about showing up, about choosing each other even when it's not easy, about building something that lasts, not just something that feels good in the moment. And you've learned this too. You learned that attraction isn't enough. That chemistry without compatibility is just fireworks that burn out fast. That someone can say all the right words, but if their actions don't match, the words are meaningless. That potential is just a word. That potential is just another word for someone who isn't ready now and may never be. You've learned to trust yourself, to listen to the quiet voice inside that knows when something's off, even when everything looks right on paper. To honor your intuition even when it means walking away from something comfortable or familiar. To believe that being alone is better than being with someone who makes you feel lonely. That's the breakthrough. That's the shift. Not finding the right person, but becoming the right version of yourself. The one who won't compromise on what matters. The one who knows her worth and won't negotiate it. The one who is healed enough to recognize healthy love. There's more I need to tell you. Stay with me just a little longer, because here's what happens after the breakthrough. Space opens. Real space. Not the empty, aching loneliness you've been carrying, but space that feels like possibility, like freedom, like the calm before something beautiful begins. And in that space, you start to notice things you couldn't see when you were busy forcing connections that didn't fit. You notice your own rhythm, your own needs, your own non-negotiables. You notice what brings you peace and what disturbs it, what nourishes you and what drains you, who adds to your life and who subtracts from it. And you start to make different choices now. Saying no when you would have said yes before. Walking away from conversations that feel toxic. Unfollowing people whose energy doesn't match yours. Spending time alone, not because you're hiding, but because you're finally comfortable with your own company. And then something unexpected happens. You stop looking, not because you've given up, but because you finally arrive to the place where you're okay, where you're building a life that feels full and meaningful, even without romantic love. Where you're not waiting for someone to complete you because you've realized you were never incomplete. Just learning, just growing, just becoming. And that's when love finds you naturally. Not when you're desperately searching, but when you're finally genuinely okay. When you stop making your worthiness conditional on being chosen. When you've learned that your value doesn't increase or decrease based on someone else's ability to recognize it. That's when everything changes. And I need you to understand, you're close. So close. Closer than you've ever been. Not because the right person is about to magically appear, but because you're finally ready for them when they do. There is so much more to share with you. Don't leave now. You're still here. That means something. It means you're not running from what's real anymore. You're not scrolling past truth. You're staying present even when it's uncomfortable, even when it touches places that still hurt. That's courage, real courage. I want to talk to you about something that nobody tells you when you're healing from heartbreak, from disappointment, from years of feeling unseen. It's the moment when you realize that the person you were waiting for was you all along, that the love you were chasing was the love you needed to give yourself, that the recognition you craved was the recognition of your own soul. And once you have that, once you truly have that, you become unshakable, and that, my friend, is when the real story begins. I have more to say. Stay here.